Hey everyone, welcome back to my podcast series on childhood mental health. In our first episode, we talked about ADHD, what it is, what symptoms look like, and why it's important to understand the conditions early in a child's life. Today, we're diving deeper. We're going to explore two major theories that try to explain ADHD, why it develops, and how we should think about it. These two viewpoints are the biological and neurodevelopmental model, and the psychosocial or environmental model. Each one offers powerful insights and both shape how we diagnose, treat, and even talk about ADHD in children. So let's get into it. Let's start with the biological model, which views ADHD as a neurodevelopmental disorder, meaning it's rooted in the way the brain develops and functions. From this perspective, ADHD isn't about bad behavior or poor parenting. It's about how certain brain regions, especially those linked to attention, impulse control, and executive function, develop differently. Research using brain imaging shows that children with ADHD often have differences in the prefrontal cortex, which helps regulate attention and decision making. They also show lower activity in dopamine pathways, which are key for motivation and reward. This biological approach suggests that ADHD has a strong genetic component. Studies of twins show that genetics play a major role. If one identical twin has ADHD, there's a high chance the other will too. Because of this biological foundation, treatment often includes medication like stimulants. An example of this would be Adderall or Ritalin, which increase dopamine and help the brain focus better. Supporters of this model argue that it helps reduce stigma. It frames ADHD not as a moral issue or a sign of laziness, but as a real medical condition. Something a child can't simply grow out of or control through willpower alone. But of course, there are criticisms too. Some say the biological model can be too narrow. It focuses heavily on the brain and genetics but may overlook environmental influences, like family stress, diet, school dynamics, or media exposure. Other worries that this view can lead to over-reliance on medication and underemphasize behavioral or social interventions. So while it's helpful to understand the physical roots of ADHD, it's not the full story. Now let's look at the psychosocial or environmental model. The perspective sees ADHD not only as a biological issue, but also something shaped by a child's environment, relationships, and experiences. Supporters of this model argue that children's attention and behavior are strongly influenced by their surroundings, things like parenting styles, classroom structure, screen time, diet, and even cultural expectations. For example, a child growing up in a chaotic home or under constant stress might show more distractibility and impulsivity, which could be labeled as ADHD, even if the underlying cause is environmental rather than neurological. The psychosocial model also suggests that society's expectations play a role. Today's world demands constant focus and self-control, even from young kids, in ways that might not align with every child's natural temperament. In that sense, ADHD symptoms might partly reflect a mismatch between the child and their environment. In terms of treatment, this approach focuses on behavioral therapy, parenting strategies, classroom adjustments, and emotional support. For example, using positive reinforcement, structured routines, and mindfulness techniques can help children learn to manage attention and impulses. One strength of this model is that it empowers families. It recognizes that context matters. A child's struggle can often be erased by changes in their environment or their relationships. But the downside is some critics say it might be unintentionally downplay the biological factors, making parents feel blamed or responsible for their child's condition. Others argue that not every child can simply be taught or trained out of ADHD symptoms, especially when those symptoms are linked to real neurobiological differences. So again, it offers valuable insight, but it's not the full answer on its own. When we look at both models side by side, it's clear they describe different layers of the same reality. The biological model highlights what's happening inside the brain, the chemistry, the structure, and the genetics. The psychosocial model highlights what's happening around the child, their family, school, and social environment. In truth, ADHD is likely a mix of both. Many psychologists now see it as a biopsychosocial disorder, meaning biology and environment constantly interact. For example, a child might have a genetic predisposition for ADHD, that's the biological side, but whether that child thrives or struggles can depend on environmental support like consistent parenting, a good school fit, and early intervention. Medication can help regulate the brain function, but therapy and lifestyle changes teach skills that last long term. So rather than seeing models as competing, it's more helpful to see them as complementary, like the two sides of the same coin. These theories don't just shape treatment, they shape how we think and how we talk about ADHD. If we only follow the biological model, we might treat ADHD entirely with medication and overlook emotional or social needs. If we only follow the psychosocial model, we might miss important neurological factors and delay effective medical help. That's why modern psychologists, educators, and parents are encouraged to use an integrative approach. This means combining medication, therapy, environmental adjustments, and emotional support. It's also important to remember that every child is different. What works for one might not work for another. ADHD exists on a spectrum, and so should our understanding of it. When we view ADHD through both lenses, biological and environmental, we can respond with compassion, flexibility, and balance. So to wrap up, the biological model helps us see ADHD as a genuine medical condition rooted in brain function and genetics. The psychosocial model reminds us that behavior and attention are shaped by context, environment, and experience. Neither model is wrong. They're just incomplete without each other. By looking at ADHD through both perspectives, we get a fuller picture, one that respects both the science of the brain and the reality of the human experience. Thanks for tuning in to this episode. In the next one, we'll explore how treatment plans combine both models to support children with ADHD in practical, everyday ways. Until then, take care, and remember, understanding the why behind behavior is the first step towards empathy and change. Thank you, and have a great day.